Welcome to Running Stronger. My name is Will France, and this week we're going to discuss a lot about shoulders and shoulder injuries and rotator cuff stuff and how to assess a shoulder injury or at least assess some shoulder pain. Now, as I say in the video, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a PT. I'm not a doctor. You should go see a PT or a doctor if you're having a bunch of shoulder pain. But I just wanted to discuss some things I have used to help people feel better when they're dealing with shoulder stuff. And if you have gone through some of the initial stages of PT and we're starting to bridge this gap, maybe back towards strength territory, some of the movements in here might be really helpful. Now, you can go look at a video of this. There's a link in the show notes. That might be much more helpful if you don't know what some of these movements are. But if you do, then listening to it will probably do you just fine. So let's get into it and talk for probably way too long about shoulder pain. Had a few conversations in the past couple weeks about rotator cuff injuries or things that seem like rotator cuff injuries. I don't really pretend to be an MRI. So if someone comes to me with shoulder pain, I don't really want to pretend like I know exactly what it is because my eyeballs are not an MRI and I don't actually know what's going on inside someone's body. But we can get some idea as to what's happening based on nothing more than like some pain provocation tests. Basically try to make the thing hurt, see what hurts, see how bad it hurts, see if we can make movement happen at all, and then maybe figure out a way to make some improvements based on what hurt and what movements hurt, right? Now, I'm probably going to say some general statements that I don't fully believe. Like I might say that your teres minor moves you upward. It is your teres minor and your infraspinatus and some other stuff, right? Just bear with me. I might overgeneralize, but we're going to try to get an idea of what happens when you have shoulder pain. And we'll give some basic concepts, basic testing mechanisms. I'm going to give you two versions of each. We're going to use this cable machine and assume that anything we do on a cable, you can also do with a band. In this particular instance, I tend to prefer a cable because it's a consistent tension, whereas for something like an external rotation, this is the weak part, and this is where the band makes it hardest. So it just doesn't really match on the strength curve level, but it's fine. It'll do. I'll also give you some isometric versions of these things that we can try to figure out how to, I don't want to use the word diagnose because I'm not a medical professional, but look at your shoulder and see what's happening. So first, if you have shoulder pain, if the shoulder isn't working right, then there might be something going on. That feels like an obvious statement, but I don't know. We often ignore stuff until it's way too much of a problem. So tests we can do to figure out what hurts in your shoulder. First, it's going to be some form of external rotation. There's no real order to these. It's just going to be easiest, right? So we're going to take a cable. I'm going to start here. We could even start here. I'm going to keep my elbow fairly close to my side and open my arm up like a barn door. I'm really just trying to rotate my upper arm, my humerus, in the socket of my shoulder and just open the thing up like a barn door. Now, the way that people are going to cheat this is they do this, right? They try and get one bunch of momentum. They start it like a lawnmower, and then they also bring their shoulder, or their elbow rather, way off of their side. This isn't doing what I'm trying to figure out. We need to just create rotation in that upper arm so that we can test to see how external rotation goes. So if you need to pin a mat or something between your elbow to prevent you from going here, then please do that. I will often tell people to keep their elbow in and they proceed to continue to do the lawnmower thing. So I just have them hold the mat. It's fine. So here, open up. You should feel a bunch of sensation back here, because that's what's opening. It attaches from your shoulder blade, your scapula, to your arm, and opens this thing up like a barn door. The way that we would do this from an isometric perspective, we would find a stable surface like this big metal pole. I would put my wrist, or right below my wrist, against this stable surface, and then I would also set a stable base so you don't knock yourself over, and then rotate out. right? I'm just doing this into something that isn't going to move. A door frame, a squat rack, a big metal thing will do a good job, but you're going to put the stable thing here and then rotate out into it and see how it feels. Could be a little better maybe if we start at this position, might get a little more engagement, but we're just trying to drive hard into something and see if we get some level of sensation. What we're really trying to do is create some level of pain or see a movement that we aren't going to, that we can't do, like the shoulder might just not move, right? So first, external rotation. That is largely your infraspinatus, especially when we're here, and a little bit of your teres minor, and then some other stuff as well. Next, let's look at internal rotation. So, yep, still in frame. Sweet. So I'm going to be here. I'm going to, again, keep my elbow close to me. I'm going to start basically out to side, and then I'm going to rotate inwards, and then control the return and rotate inwards. I want to keep tension on the cable the entire time. Now again, if we just end up doing this kind of movement where it's this weird broken chest fly, then pin the thing, pin the mat, pin the pad between your elbow and your torso so that you can force yourself to create this rotation. This is largely going to be your subscap or your subscapularis. And the way we would do this if we didn't have a cable or a band is, again, find a door frame, find an immovable object, put the exact opposite side but same space above your wrist on your forearm on that immovable object, and then rotate inwards, trying to bring the barn door of your arm closed and see if we have any sensation or pain. Now, next, we're going to look at what I would call upward rotation. This is still external rotation. Notice this is external rotation. I abduct my arm, still externally rotated, right? So all of this is some version of external rotation. But when the scapula kind of moves, you get a different priority of your teres minor to your infraspinatus. So one of those could be fine, and the other one can be really problematic. So we're going to see how the other one is. So we're going to raise this a little bit. Probably want the cable about your eye level. And then I'm going to step back and make this a little lighter. And then I'm going to pull my elbow directly out from my side. You're going to try to drop it. You're going to try to have it forward. No, directly out from your side. And then we're going to rotate upwards. I tell people to imagine they're like Jackie Chan, like hitting someone back-fisted in the face, except again, not a lawnmower. Try and control the entire movement, nice and smooth, and stay with your upper arm in place, just rotating. So rotate that upper arm and then return under control. Rotate the upper arm, return under control. The ways we tend to cheat this are, you flare the hell out of your ribs, right? So we create a bunch of back extension. We get your ribs up, and then we're not actually rotating the arm. I can get an extra, 30 degrees from that movement if I really try, if I use my low back enough. So we really want to make sure that ribs and abs are braced and down, and then just rotate up in the arm. And you should get a bunch of sensation through here as that arm rotates upwards. This is not a particularly easy one to do without some kind of cable or band. We can find something like a door frame to rotate up and back into, but ideally, I guess you could kneel under a table and rotate up, right? So if I'm like kneeling here, let's imagine that this table is kind of above me. I find a table edge, and then I could rotate up into it. That would be a way that we could try a pain provocation test at home. This is one that I tend to struggle with prescribing for people if we don't have access to a gym, because it's just harder. It's not that it's impossible. I could do this under my desk, I guess, at my house, but I would have to get under there like Smeagol from Lord of the Rings in order to get into a position that would actually make me able to rotate that upwards properly. So do what you can, do your best. Next, we have your supraspinatus, which is responsible for these first, 15 to 30 degrees of abduction here, where your arm comes off of your side. Think a lateral raise, except the very first part of a lateral raise. This is largely what this is going to do. It basically sucks your shoulder into socket so that the meat of your deltoid can do more work. So we're going to grab cable, we're going to be here, we're going to stand, and we're going to pull out. Don't really need to go any higher than this. We can, but we're just working the deltoid. Lateral raises are great. We're not what we're doing right now. So hold on, stable here, and then pull out to about a 45 and come back in. If this feels fine, it's probably fine. Now, the ways that we tend to cheat this are people will roll forward and basically use their rear delt to come out and then come up. It's over exaggerated to deliver the point. It looks more like this, but if you have to roll forward, kind of pull out with your rear delt and then turn this into a lateral raise, not a good sign, right? We want to be able to stay up, keep our shoulder blade flat to our rib cage, and then just pull directly out. If we are unable to do that, something is wrong. Maybe you're really weak, but maybe you have a supraspinatus problem. There's also a couple other things there could be where, the isometric version. Stand in next to a wall and rotate out, or pull or abduct out. All right, so I'm going to stand right next to a wall, maybe with my arm slightly off my side, and then try to open it out like I'm flapping a wing, but I can't because I'm pushing it into an immovable object. A couple others that it can be are like something actually in your deltoid, right? It could be this anterior deltoid. So we could just check by going up, elevating here. You can go palms down, but it kind of sucks to drive your knuckles into something. So I usually just use the meat of the hand. If you, again, have a table, you can drive up to the underside of a table or a desk, but we're going to be here. I'm going to drive up. We can do this exact same thing. The cable, we'd be here, and then we'd drive up with the cable. You either go thumb up or palms flat, kind of figure it out. But if we're unable to do this without a ton of pain, something's probably not great. But the isometric version, as I mentioned, is just doing that into a door frame. And then finally, at least the last one I'm really thinking of, is going to be maybe a bicep, because like bicep stuff crosses shoulder and tends to get pissy sometimes. So the ways we would test that would be pretty easy for a cable. We're just going to be here, and you're going to curl the cable and see how it feels. You might even do like a preacher curl with a dumbbell and see what you got. We can also do this, again, up into a table. I'm going to use this door frame because I have it, but this is one I actually do like to get underneath something. We're going to be here, and I'm going to try to flex my arm, like really squeeze my bicep to bring it up. Imagine this is a table and a movable object. It's going to be here, drive up into that table. And we're just going to figure out what hurts, right? If any of those hurt, if any of those are impossible, if any of those are not, we can't do them without some sort of stability and control, something's going on. And then as far as making it better, we can just use the assessment as our starting point, right? If you think it might be something related to your supraspinatus, let's imagine that these lateral, we just can't really get out here without a bunch of pain. If it can't move at all, not ideal, but if we can't move without a bunch of pain, then we can either start with a really light weight, we can start with a really light band, or we can drive isometrics out. And we'd probably want, if we're doing something that's moving, 8 to 10 reps, 3 sets, minute or 2 rest in between, and we're going to want it to be very slow. I like to have a 3 to 5 count out, 1 second pause, 3 to 5 count in, 1 second pause. Every bit of this should be really controlled, because if it is a tendon issue, shock loading it is about the worst thing we could possibly do to make it worse, right? Now, if we are looking at an isometric, let's say I'm going to drive, again, supraspinatus example, going to drive out. Probably want to drive as hard as we can there's 2 versions of this, right? One would be to take a weight. So we could do this with the band, or we could do this with the weight. I'm just going to hold this out to my side, try and get some engagement, hold it out to here, whatever it feels right, but probably here. And then we're going to hold that for about 20 seconds. much as we can. We're going to rest for 20 seconds. We're going to do that 5 times. You can just go back and forth to sides and use that as your rest period. Or we can do what we call an overcoming isometric. That was a yielding isometric. You can also do an overcoming isometric, where find a stable surface, drive into that surface. And that will be probably a 5-second hold, 5-second rest. You're gonna do that 4 times. It's kind of like a cluster set idea. Then you'll rest a minute or 2, and then you'll do that whole thing 3 times. So drive for 5, rest for 5, drive for 5, rest for 5, 4 times. Rest for a minute or 2, drive for 5, rest for 5, 3 times total. And we do any of these things, might do a couple of both, right? If we're able to do some nice slow movement as well as an isometric, that'd be really good. And then we do that 2 or 3 times a week. You could do it every day, but we're probably not going to see a ton of additional benefit, and we might create even more fatigue. The only reason I would really recommend every day would be if someone needs routine so badly that if they don't do it every day, then they won't do it, right? And even then, we probably still wouldn't do the movement one. We would just do the yielding, hold the weight out isometric version of that every day to create the pattern, and then we'd add some other stuff on top of it. There are more complicated versions of this. Oh, one more, I guess. You can also use eccentrics for this, right? So we can resist more weight coming back in than we can usually create force going out. Think about being able to control a squat down more than you're able to drive out of the hole. Same idea. So we can do this for pretty much all of these movements, right? I can use my other hand to get this weight up here in this lateral raise position, and then slowly control the weight back in over a 5 or 6 count, and then repeat. Drive out here, slowly control the weight back in for a 5 or 6 count. You can do this for what I'd call the teres minor, the upward rotation as well. Be here. We can use both hands to get to this position and then slowly control the return for a 5 or 6 count. Eccentrics are really helpful. I think a lot of people view them as magical, but they're just really helpful because they allow us to apply a ton of load without being limited to force. When we're looking at anything tendon recovery-ish, it is going to be based on a couple principles. We need to put some stimulus through the muscle and through the tendon, because those things work together. And then we need to do it in a way that isn't going to make the injury worse. And that is a tough line to follow sometimes. It can be really long. Tendon recovery can take 6, 9, 12 months. A lot of people want it to take 1 or 2, and then they get really frustrated when they don't see progress in the course of 8 weeks. That's just an unrealistic expectation. Most of the time, unless you catch it super early when we're just at an inflamed phase, you're going to need to expect 6, 9, 12 months before we actually get a full level of recovery in a tendon. And that's if you do this kind of work well. Now, we do actually want to put some stimulus through it. It shows that it can recover faster. It shows that it can recover better. You don't need to rebuild from scratch, but we need to be responsible. So things like eccentrics and isometrics are great ways to limit your likelihood of re-injuring something. As I said earlier, it's kind of a throw-off comment. Shock loading a tendon is a great way to hurt a tendon, right? So if we're looking at something like those lateral raises, we don't just want to be slamming it out there. That's fine for some people if you're not injured. But if we're injured, we want to really be controlled. Think of the concept of heavy, slow resistance. It needs to be proportionally heavy to what the muscle and tendon can handle. That might be 5 pounds now. It might be 30 pounds in 6 months, right? But we need to be proportionally heavy to what the tendon can handle. It needs to be slow, thus the 3-1-3-1 count. And it needs to be resisted, right? The resistance part is self-explanatory. So if we're looking at tendon stuff, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a PT, I'm not a medical professional. You should go see those people to try to get a diagnosis and see what actually happens. But when we're looking at treatment, if we look at some of the people who are at the head of this field, be it Jake Tura or Peter Malieras down in Australia, or anybody who's really working successfully with tendons, we see that some of the best diagnostics tend to be pain provocation tests. We see what's problematic, and then we use that pain provocation, the results of whatever pain provocation, to create some sort of system to stimulate the tendon and the muscle that the tendon is attached to, right? So that's rotator cuff stuff. Again, like, go see someone if you can get it MRI'd or ultrasounded or whatever to get a real diagnostic of what's there. You should do that, because it might be completely ruptured, right? And you'd probably, like, sometimes we would know that. If you rupture your Achilles, pretty easy to know. It usually sounds like a gunshot, and then you can't walk. When it comes to your rotator cuff, there's so many muscles around there that can compensate that we might not really understand that it's entirely ruptured without getting some imaging. That said, I'd also like to say that if we look at imaging, or like general studies of imaging on rotator cuffs, so many people have some level of tear. I think by the time you're like 70 or 80, there's almost 100% likelihood of you having some level of rotator cuff tear. Doesn't mean you can't move, doesn't mean you can't do stuff well. It just means that the shoulder is not a particularly stable joint. And as a result, the muscles, because we don't really have a ton of stuff that keeps it in there, the muscles that attach it are at higher risk for injury, especially if we live an active life. So when we talk about rotator cuff tears and high instances of rotator cuff tears, it rarely means that they're completely severed or ruptured off the body, but it does mean that most people are going to have some sort of damage. And if we can figure out how to control that, it'd be preferable, right? Another thing that can help us continue to train while we have rotator cuff stuff, and I was going to hit this at the end, it's going to be a whole separate thing if we want it to be, but it's probably just not long enough to justify it, is what we'd call thoracic extension, right? This extension in your upper back, making the curve, like, right, everybody's back should curve forward. The concave place should be facing the front of you. And if we are able to create some convexity by getting your shoulder blades down really hard and curving your spine in the other direction in your upper back, that's not where you should live. It's just a tool that we can use to create some stability and continue to train, right? Like, this is how good bench pressers bench press, create a ton of thoracic extension because it's super stable that we can use to press. And this is how we should be doing pull-ups as well. If we don't have any thoracic extension or scapular engagement, rather, necessarily need to be extended. But if we have zero scapular engagement, if we're just floppy, our pull-ups aren't going to be very good. So if we don't have good control of our shoulder blades, if they don't move, if our ribs don't move, if our spine doesn't move, then we should also be working on some of that mobility and control as well, because it will allow our shoulders to take less of the load throughout our daily life. Hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, you can comment or reach out to me. I'm always around on Instagram somewhere, and would be happy to chat with you about this stuff. Hope this was helpful.